between a group of us that maybe pressured him to realising that he needed to get his butt over here?
And to give credit to them, I mean, I think they're starting to realise that, that they need to, in a sense, get out to people and they realise the extent of what we were trying to organise, so I think that probably helped.
Yeah. So well done.
Yeah, no, and many thanks also to Rob. Because obviously it was very difficult at the time when we were sort of looking for speakers, because at that stage there wasn't even a draft order. Yeah. So what were we going to speak on? And then, but Rob still put up his hand, and fortunately did come through, so he was able to speak with a little bit more authority, and it was very, very helpful. Yeah. So anyway, basically it's clear, I think everyone's aware that all export containers will be verified way as of July 1st, and everyone's implementing this. So there have been moves afoot, well, can we delay this? Or what can we do to sort of perhaps prevent things from happening? But even the United States, the Coast Guard quashed it and said no, it is going ahead, and everyone is involved. So part of the thing is that obviously different countries are looking at different ways of doing this. But Australia's in a sense going down a particular line. So we're not looking at a register of shippers as is the UK system, or we're not looking at, in a sense, well, weight tolerances as in a percentage. So there is a form of weight tolerance, and I'll get into that in a second. But it's, we're not taking in percentages, which other countries are. So the main reasons for the seminar were to obviously have a chance for people who speak to the actual authority themselves and hear from that authority, and also to hear from experts. So obviously we have key international container supply chain participants, so we'll see who those were in a second. And obviously then one of the things was to sort of give people an indication of what sort of methods could be used to carry out these sort of weighs. And then obviously to provide feedback to AMSA as to what some of the key points were. We had 150 people attending, which was good. We obviously sort of, but as far as Fremantle Ports is concerned, we wanted to focus initially on the quantum of the problem. So we sent out surveys. We did it for both transport operators and for exporters. So we sent out to 90 transport operators, and more than half responded. Of those, 32% did say that they pack containers for export in some way. However, was the sale price based on the weight of the product, the container? And many of them said no. So that was, in a sense, I suppose, a bit of a surprise. It's then when we come down to the accuracy of the weighs, and we start getting to have a little bit of a problem, because clearly people are talking about multiple methods, historically fairly accurate, calibrated, cross-checked with a forklift, reliance on customers to provide information, manufacturers' specs, those sorts of things gave fairly unclear answers, or certainly not definitive answers, or at least show that there's probably still a few people out there who probably don't really understand the extent of the certification that they're going to need in order to comply with this into the future. And so that's part of the thing. So although most aren't involved, there's still a series of them who do, but about half of the people who do weigh containers probably have methods that could still be somewhat questionable. So where they really do have to then start to tighten up their understanding of the type of calibration or the type of certification and testing that they need to go through, and what is the acceptable form of a calibrated weight. So clearly we went out to exporters as well. They're most likely to be the shippers in many respects. And 45%, we covered about 45% of the TU volume with the 73 response that we got. So we thought that was, again, a fairly good result. Now, in contrast, obviously, because they are the exporters, 91%, so nearly everybody based the sale price on weight. So that showed that they would need to have some sort of indication, a good indication that they are providing to their customer of what that weight is. But of course, people have different methods of doing that. So 100% of the ones who had a weighbridge, weighed the whole content of the containers. In other words, there are two methods of weighing. Method 1 says weigh the whole thing. Method 2 says weigh the contents and the container and add it together. So using method 1, all of them used the weighbridge and it was certified and calibrated. So that gave us a good degree of surety. But there's still a third, and even, goodness knows what other is. But there's still people who are still, in a sense, probably not even quite 100% sure of how they're actually getting that sale price. But the others sort of use method 2. So again, 91% understand themselves to be the shipper, and sort of carrying out their weighs. 2/3 of the weighs, two-thirds could weigh the whole container. But of those that aren't, this is where it starts to be a bit of a mixed bag. They're using volumetric measures. Many of them are using volumetric measures, or historical estimates, or calibrated, whatever that may be. So they think it's calibrated, but again, calibrated can simply be, well, I've got this, and I know it's about a tonne, So I'll plonk it on the fork, or I'll plonk it on my scale every so often and say, yep, someone needs about a tonne, I'm fine. Rather than going through and getting the certified and calibrated verification. So that we sort of thought, we're still thinking that there's probably still, a quarter, obviously now this survey is going back a few months, but about a quarter who may not be necessarily complying, and still with a range of accuracy levels. Some, incredibly accurate, so obviously these are people who probably have weigh bridges or are getting these NMI, National Measurement Institute people to come around and do these certified checks, but then again, you're still getting, quite a bit of variance. And in a sense, they're just the ones we survey, so in a sense, who else is out there? So, we obviously had our seminar itself, and when this goes through the rest of the seminar. So that's what I presented on the part of the Fremantle course. We then had David Anderson, who is the person who's more or less heading up this, providing the AMSA point of view. And AMSA are a regulator, so they take a regulator point of view. I mean, they're bureaucrats, so they sit there and they take a bureaucrat. So basically it was, I don't know what other people's opinions were, but it was pretty much, here's the order, comply. And in a sense, that's probably what you'd be expecting of a bureaucrat sitting in Canberra. It was a bit of a concern that, that while they have looked at, sort of a couple of different methods, and let's give them their due. So it's not as if they've been sitting there sort of thinking, well, we're just going to, sort of stick to one very narrow definition. They have looked at what other countries are doing. In other words, the registered approved operator system in the UK, looking at tolerances based on percentages, as is the case in the Netherlands and other countries. But they decided to go against that. They've gone for, in a sense, again, for a bureaucrat's point of view, is a safe method, and that is certified and calibrated means using increments of error. So if you're talking tolerances rather than percentages, they're talking increments of error. So it's a bit small down here, unfortunately, but if you sort of pick that up, what it means is that depending on the type of instrument that you're using, for particular weight ranges, you're given particular increments of error that you're allowed to have. So the example that he provided here is if you had a forklift with a cable of 16,000 tonnes and it's doing these increments in 100 kilo breaks, you're allowed 10 increments at 1,000 kilos either side. So if you're trying to weigh something that's 1,000 kilos, you're allowed 10 increments either side. So as you can see, that's quite a range. But when you start getting up to higher levels, so the 16,000, in other words, the 16 tonne, it's only 160 increments. So really, you're starting to talk about 1.56 or so percentage. Obviously, either side makes that 3.2%, 3.12%. So you're starting to make it quite narrow. As an example, the Netherlands is probably setting on a range of 5% overall. Here, when you're starting to get to probably what you're going to be weighing in a container, remember 16 tonne is not a particularly heavy container, it's alright, it's not particularly heavy. You've got to be within about 3% or about 250 kilos either side. Now for some, that's going to probably be a bit of an issue. But that's in a sense what they're going for. So obviously, we're still concerned about the practical supply chain considerations, in other words, the cost to get the certified weight, and the possible bottlenecks. In other words, you're still expecting people to go to weigh bridges, you're still expecting mobile operators to come by and set up and weigh your thing and all this sort of thing. What are the bottlenecks? What are the extra costs? What are the extra delays that you're going to experience? A little bit of an interesting one is that AMSA have said, though, that they would consider alternative methodologies if you've got one that they believe would meet the overall requirements. Now, they haven't been very clear on that. So that's in a sense what I'm requesting is that and we'll try and go out to it, we've got a meeting of our load safe group happening next week, is that I think we need to be going out to people sort of saying, if you've got another method, and this is what you've used, and it's shown that you've got a particularly good way of carrying out these weights and getting the accuracy, let AMSA know, let's try and see if we can get that included as well. Alright, so a couple of the other presentations, just to run through very quickly. Obviously, the Deputy Harbour Master, we're fortunate to have him, and he's come along. And you can sort of see from this graph that of the incidents, the cargo incidents that occurred in recent years, half of them nearly were due to cargo weight or misdeclarations on the shipping documentation.
Michael, can I just stop you right there? Can I introduce John to just give a brief overview of what took place at the terminal last week?
Certainly.
Yeah, okay. So it's interesting. I'm just going to read a paragraph here. So we had YM Keelan, a contract vessel, was heading to us. We got a message from the vessel, please note containers on base 10 side. 4 have collapsed on deck and landed on the heavy hatch pontoon and made contact with stacking containers on the port side. Due to the full impact of the stack, the containers are damaged. Vessel has experienced heavy swell 5 to 6 metres and is presently at dead slow speed, which is 5.5 knots. Vessel has been able to make the turn to Fremantle after completion of the Australian fight, as the swell shifts to the quarter and induces heavy, violent rolling. So rolling is, as you can see, bottom left, so they were in a real spot of bother. The containers in the mentioned bay were loaded at Brisbane and were bound for Singapore. The vessel got here. There are 8 containers impacted, simply because of the swell, and that's all fine. Our key cranes couldn't lift them off, so we had to get some boom cranes in that drove in, etc. We got some information on these containers, what weights they were, and the information we were provided was that, in simple terms, as soon as I can find it here, that the 8 containers weighed from 24 tonne, 24.3, 3.6, 1.9, 1.9, 22, 29, that's all great. We go to lift it with slings, the lighter ones, and chains, thinking that, well, they're only a couple of tonne plus the container's not hard at all, and the rest of it wouldn't move, couldn't budge them. Really bizarre. 3 of them were tank tonnes. So we went and checked and they said, oh, they're empty, don't worry about it, it's all good. So we still couldn't move them. So then we got another crane in, we still couldn't move them. And then we did some more investigation, they weren't empty at all. We got told that they had a particular oil in them, which is like a, had a consistency, I don't know the actual terminology, I've got all the material data here if anyone's really interested. But in simple terms, it was like olive oil, so it's reasonably light, and we got told a particular oil in them. So we first got told there was nothing in them. We then got told there's a virgin oil in them. So we had to make a decision because we were scared they were going to get punctured. And if they got punctured, there was high likelihood that they could obviously hit the harbour. So we decided we'd pump them out because we just couldn't risk it. Because the way they fell and damaged, there was real concerns. So we got some pumps in to pump them out. After 2 hours of pumping, we got nowhere in a hurry. We then did some further investigation. They actually had processed oil in them, a black sludge. Hence the pump couldn't pump them because the thickness was oil. But the real reality is that inadvertently we put our own personnel in an incredibly dangerous situation because someone didn't declare the proper weights. There was no MDS sheets that we were provided with for those particular tanks because they were empty. So they weren't empty at all, but the fact is we go to move them. We had people on deck trying to lift these things, and I've got photos, and then, you know, the damage was really severe. So this is a real living example of what can go wrong. I'm happy to hand this around, but in simple terms, they're only sitting on a skewed angle like that, but going to move them, we just thought that's easy enough, but the reality is they were full, and we had personnel on deck trying to put chains on them, etc., and go to move them. Thank God we couldn't move them, because they moved a bit, who knows the weight of them, what might have happened. So it's a real issue. So we just happen to have a living example of why, I guess, having weights and things and getting the correct information at the port destination is critical. Because you just don't know what's going to happen. And so the vessel left at 2:10 yesterday morning, this morning, simply because we took so long to get them off.
Well, we were very pleased that we had, Stuart Davey, the Harbour Master, and Rob presenting, because they were the 2 key messages that they wanted to bring across. Well, this is not somebody trying to have a go at industry. It's not somebody trying to want to add extra cost for the heck of it. It is a serious issue and it is a major safety.
But it's a reality.
Yeah, it happens. That's the thing.
And the thing is that AMSA, this is ideal for AMSA because they go through the whole chain, and they will ultimately have to go to the exporter, whoever that may be, and the points that somebody asked about will be allocated to a fine. So, yeah.
I guess the other point, this has sort of come out of safety of life at sea and the SOLAS stuff. But there's obviously, land side safety issues as well.
Well, the AMSA look after the terminal, so AMSA's responsibility is from the terminal to onboard the ship. So it's very real.
Well, it's interesting that we've now got an issue that the MEI are at us. They're going, oh, you put our personnel in danger. What is that for? That's the information we got. and it was a contract vessel, so they weren't a direct customer of ours, etc. and so forth. So look, the reality is, I think, why it's important to highlight it is that let's not kid ourselves, it does happen. How can something now that weighs 24 tonne be said that it weighed 1.9 or something? No, that's just not acceptable.
Excuse me, Michael. At the forum, I asked David Anderson the question about how they would police this, and the answer was that basically they wouldn't police it, they would rely on information. And one of the comments he made was that the terminals are obliged to advise AMSA of any container weights that are different to what has been declared. Is that the case?
I'd have to go to the regs, but I believe so.
I understood that wasn't the case. I understood that there was no actual particular responsibility on the part of the...
Not so far as this regulation goes, but just in the general
On
transport
MO41, yes, there is. Under MO42, no, they're not. The terminals do not have to report anything under the SOLAS container weight thing.
Under SOLAS, it states that we can accept what's on the declaration.
Yeah, but under MO41, if you receive an overweight or a misdeclared weight that you know to be the case, I think you're obliged to reply. It's the same as if you're lifting a tractor at berth 11 and 12 and it reads 10 tonne on it and it's 32 tonne. The general cargo stevedore is obliged to advise AMSA through that process. So.
But again, that's if you're accepting that the equipment that you're doing those moves on is calibrated and certified.
No, Michael, it's not got anything to do with the equipment. If the cargo is misdeclared under MO41, you are obliged to, as an agent, ship's agent, as a ship's master, as a stevedore, general cargo stevedore, you're obliged to advise.
But the terminals up to now have always claimed that they can't get an accurate weight because the equipment doesn't handle it. So
yeah.
Exactly. Way out. Okay. Anyway, so yes, and so very good points that are made there. Obviously, Stu was pointing out that 5 years is the first time now the ship's master has the opportunity to actually refuse a load. So we had, DP World coming through and mentioning that, that they will not load without a verified weight, but there is now the ability through the PRA, through the one-stop system, to be able to handle that, which MSC also confirmed they were intending to use and pointed out that sort of misdeclarations are a major issue. Okay. So we're going through. This will be in the presentation. The presentation will be in the notes. I'm noting, Mr. Chairman, that we're sort of a little short on time. It's a reasonably straightforward sort of flow chart to see how you actually get your PRA accepted in it. There's nothing, I think, no sort of major changes as to what you're probably doing right now anyway, so feel free to have a look at that in the minutes. System providers, obviously, they talk about various types of offers that are out there, mobile devices, weighing mechanisms with twist locks, etc. So again, you can find the presentation on the Fremantle Port's website if you'd like to go into that in a little more detail. We've gone back to the seminar people. People attended and asked them could they provide some feedback. So obviously it's very initial feedback, but so the good news is that 95% feel that they now know more about how to obtain and provide a verified gross mass. The not so good news is that there's still a quarter of respondents who still haven't assessed their weighing methodology against the requirements. So even at this sort of stage, with a few months to go, there's probably a quarter of them who still haven't really done that assessment. And 15% still aren't even sure if they even need to obtain the verified gross mass or not. So again, these are concerns. This is something we have to probably focus on. And half have concerns, still have concerns about being ready in time. In other words, we're not saying that they're not going to be ready, but that they have things like delays to getting the equipment that they need in time, or additional costs that they're going to face, and how they're going to sort of pass it on or get that through the supply chain, lack of time to prepare system changes, etc. So we've asked them also sort of comments. What would you like to see? Are there any sort of particular comments you made? And they're fairly good comments. They're saying that it needs to be simpler, and what's an acceptable tolerance. Because obviously, you go back to that increments of error. Well, if there are a whole lot of people here who understand that means, that's great. I'd like to see, sort of your average exporter try and work out what that means. Clear, unambiguous guidelines. Who's supposed to do, what, when? And I think a very important one that wasn't really answered is what type of records do I need to keep? In other words, if for whatever reason there were to be an investigation, how can I show that I did comply? And I think they've been a little bit light on that information. Why can't the terminals do it? Why can't it just be a check weigh at the port? Something to avoid the additional costs and time, because now our exports will become uncompetitive. You know, we're having to go through this rather rigorous verification regime, while perhaps other jurisdictions in other countries make that much simpler to comply with. So will we now have an extra burden to our competition, our competitivity? Somebody mentioned it here, I'd like to hear John's comment at some stage. What if the person named on the ocean bill, the shipper, is a forwarder who never actually sees and handles the cargo physically? So how are they supposed to verify for this? I don't know how much of an issue that is, but good to hear from John at some stage.
It's very
who's
clear.
going to enforce this? Because the Cowboys are still... Sorry, Jim.
It's very clear in the Act. Very clear. They have to.
Yeah.
Simple as that. There's no ambiguity on that at all. If EES shipping is shown as the exporter on the master bill of lading, they must know exactly what's the weight of that container is and have it verified. So in other words, it goes across the weighbridge.
Simple. As long as they have a document chain back to the people who weighed it, that's okay. No, I think the regulations say as long as you have it, if EES is shown on the bill as a forwarder, and they have a record of a weight taken from their client, then acceptable. That is acceptable as a document chain.
Yeah.
EES do not have to go and weigh it.
Okay.
Providing we've got the VGM method 1 or 2 on our document, which we've got an authorisation letter for now, it's acceptable to EES.
Okay.
So I might have discussed that, like I say, group. Who's going with us? I mean, the point was just made here, because obviously the Cowboys will still just go ahead and lie about their VGM, in the sense who's necessarily going to check up. Where's the list of who can actually do my method of weighing? In other words, it's all well and good to sort of say, it's got to be done in a particular way, but who are the people who actually provide this service? Can somebody help us out with that? Somebody mentioned about including the centre of gravity with the VGM, and I think it's a valuable thing, but I don't very much going to come about. And then there was at some point here about, do shipping line instructions also need to be signed by the shipper? And that's it. So we've had some good feedback. It's been a successful seminar, and obviously we've got our load safe group continuing to work on this.
Okay. Any comments of Michael? I know it's late, but while we're here. Okay.
A quick one, but the poll was very good on what they said about the weighbridge. But I've got 2 questions on. One is it a bit late when you get to the port to do a weighing and then have to follow up with the documentation from there? That's the first one. Is that a bit too late? But the other one is, I'd like to know of the volume of vehicles that come through that weighbridge, how many are there semi-trailers that have 2 containers on them? You can't separate the weights, or it would be double. And if that's a large percentage of our truck fleet, then we have a concern about the quality of the weighbridge.
Well, it's not the quality of the weighbridge, but you pointed out some very valid point.
Yeah.
Very valid point. So I'll quickly give my synopsis, and obviously we've got Daniel, who probably is the expert on it. But the understanding is that what Tyler arranged with One Stop is that the feed will go from the weighbridge through into the PRA, will update the PRA. But the question about the 2 containers on one trailer is possible, but I'll let Dan.
And the same thing applies to a BW, I think, because you can't separate the weights there.
Well, from a CLR point of view, you are right, John. It is probably late once the container arrives at the weighbridge, but from our responsibility point of view, we notify One Stop prior to the container arriving at the terminal. If there's a difference in the weight, that will automatically update, and that's fine. From a weighing point of view, we are currently in discussions with the provider making modifications to the current system. So at the moment we can't weigh 2 containers on the one trailer. If it's so basically the only weighing we can do is get 1 container per trailer.
Yeah.
But there is some steps that we're discussing that potentially we can weigh both containers on the one trailer. So that's something that will be ongoing, which I don't have a timeline on when that's going to be resolved, or if the solution is live work present. So
Okay. I think we need to close it off there. Thank you for your comments. The port report is being circulated. Mark will have to miss out on